one person's opinion may not be a reflection of you.
And I've not used this for ages, but I like to refer to myself as a buffet learner.
It sort of goes back to that thing, you can't tell people what to do, right?
They'll implant themselves in my brain, and I'll be more conscious of them in my interactions with people.
If it's self-awareness, how self-aware is the person who's giving the advice on self-awareness?
I don't wake up in the morning to come to work and be a panic object. I come to work to do a good job, to learn and to do the best thing I can. I'm doing my best to not swear.
InspirationNation, hello, it is Lee Kemp here for another week on the podcast, as always with Ryan Boniface and Jose Noya, carving out a bit of time for us in his very busy schedule. We do appreciate it. How are you doing, both of you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
I can't believe you said that after last week's debacle of turning up late.
Who, me?
Not even like averagely late, like fashionably 2-3 minutes. Like,
what's an hour and 10 minutes between friends, eh?
Just cannot believe that. We and Ryan were hanging on for ages. Anyway, carry on.
We thank you everyone for downloading, watching us on YouTube, listening across podcast platforms, and of course follow us on social media at Listen to IN, Listen TOIN. Quite a few, it's a word we can say, new follows in the last few weeks, so we appreciate that. Helps get the message out there. And whatever service you're listening on, if you like us, if you're a regular listener, please leave us a review. It helps get more momentum for the podcast.
Boom.
So I just very quickly, before we talk about the show, I just wanted to do a little follow-up to last week, because last week we talked about my whole ignoring judgment philosophy and what happens if you don't let it get in. And I've been putting it into practice last week. So several occasions where I would have possibly thought someone was judging me, and I put it out of my mind, took it they were doing good intentions. I don't know whether they were or weren't, what difference it made, but I tell you what, I felt better about myself.
That's fantastic.
Specific example, and there was quite a few of these. And I was noting as I go, this will be good to reference, but I can't remember all of them now. But there was one, I went to a museum in a foreign land at the weekend. And as I went through, scanned my ticket, said thank you very much. And the guy in a fake Cockney accent was like, "Oh, cool, cheerio, mate." And I think I possibly would have taken that as, oh, I sounded a bit stupid and feel a bit insecure, but I didn't. I took it that he was being quite funny. He was making a joke with me. We had a laugh, and I carried on about what I was doing. And no more stress about it. Just one example. And there's lots of little bits like that where I thought, I'll take it as good intentions and I'll push through, see what it does to my confidence, my own self-worth. I think it's helping. And I'll give a few little updates where it goes, but I've been really conscious about putting it into practice.
So can I ask you a question just quickly before we start, really? On a scale of 1 to 10, how were you feeling before? And a scale of 1 to 10 now after you've implemented what you've done?
And the way I'll put it is, I don't have it on now, but I have a watch that is made by a company that uses fruit as its logo.
Apple.
Indeed. And people always ask, oh, is it good to have it? And what I say is that if you've never had a smartwatch, you won't miss what it does. It's not like you say, oh, you have to get it for it. But once you've had one and you get used to it, you wouldn't be without it. And I'd say it's the same with this, that I wouldn't say that before I had this concept, I'd be like, oh, I put my happiness as a 7 out of 10 and I've gone up to a 9, because I think I was good, but I'm just like a different type, a more enhanced version of good now doing this, I think.
I love it. And
does that make sense? Yeah. I feel so more confident in myself. I push through, not worrying about stuff so much and just being conscious to push on doing it. Obviously, it's not 100% of the time, but I'm just making a few notes to myself of, that would be good to put that into practice now, and I'm going to keep doing it and see how it goes.
Bloody love that. That's fantastic. That's really good. That keeps abreast of that. That's brilliant. I'd like to keep an eye on that because, actually, I've not been conscious of it, but I think I want to see how this experiment goes, and I want to be more conscious of it as well. So I think if we can all do that, that'd be good.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. Right, this week on the Wheel of Conversation, we have no wheel when it's a set schedule, but on the Wheel of Conversation, Ryan Boniface is up, I believe. What do you have for us this week, my good man?
So usually when it comes around to me having the conversation, is it cushion? Is it when you have an intervention, somebody gets a cushion and that's when they're the only person that's allowed to talk? It's a weird reference. I don't even remember.
Like a little stick or something, yes.
Yeah, the conversation stick or whatever. usually when it's my turn to hold the conversation stick, I like to talk about things that kind of are unrelated to our usual topics, because I like to mix it up a little bit. This week, however, I'm going to go back true to form. So a conversation that I think would suit our usual platform and the stuff that we normally talk about. And I want to talk about, and I don't really have a title for it, and that's where you two geniuses come in, I guess. But it's a conversation that revolves around, what do you do when you get conflicting advice or a conflicting position on something you think you've done? Have you ever had somebody say, Joe, that piece of work was absolutely fantastic, well done, and then the next day you come into work, big smile on your face, and somebody says, that piece of work you did, Joe, was absolutely terrible, why have you done that? And what if you have had that kind of, how did that make you feel? Who do you believe? And whilst there is taking positives from both scenarios, how do you let that, if you do let that affect you, how and in which way? And I know we can have the conversation about one person's opinion may not be a reflection of you, but if they're genuinely doing their best to help you and that's the opinion they formed, then how do you navigate that?
Really good, like that. Lee, do you want to jump in first?
Sure. And I jump on a bit you said not to say, and hopefully it doesn't, but within rolling work, it involves a lot of people leadership and stuff like that. And I always try to, I would say always careful to, but I always try to, or endeavor when I'm talking to people, especially when it's people for the first time, is to say that a big caveat on the start of this is a lot of this is my opinion and my perception and my lens on the world, and not everyone sees it in the same way I do, particularly when it's people who I talk about, oh, look, here's a good way to report up on this, or to show this, or demonstrate this, or communicate this. I said, I can give you my view on what I do. I can give you my view on how you interact with certain people, but actually everyone's different and there's no right way and there's no wrong way, but you've just got to, take what you like from this and add it into what I like to call, and I've not used this for ages, but I like to refer to myself as a buffet learner. So I take a bit from here and a bit from here and a bit from there, and then I smash it all together into my own thing. So this is why I'm saying there are, there's bits to take from everyone. Everyone will have a different perception and a different lens, based on their own experiences, based on the message they're trying to put across, based on what they're doing with people. And, as someone who gets different feedback in different ways from people and things, sometimes people want something very specific. Even people can do it. Someone will want something very specific, and then something will change for them, and actually they might want something, that very specific thing changes quite radically later because of another reason, whatever that may be. So I think it's important to know, I think in any context really, there is no right and there is no wrong. There's a lot of opinions and a lot of subjectivity, and it's what you can take from that and what you put into your own self and how you use it.
What are your thoughts on that, Ryan?
Yeah, I think that's fair and completely justified. I think it's difficult when the conversation doesn't necessarily, and this was going to be a follow-up question, but I'll bring it now. This does we're talking about it in a context where it could be off of a piece of work. What if it's about, and I'm a firm believer in personalities and behavioral types being completely different things. Somebody's personality may not be the behavior that they show. What if the comment or the feedback, or however you want to describe it, is around your personality rather than some work you've done? Now, for a bit more context on this, that I quite often say, and I don't know if we've had the conversation on the podcast, but Lee and I have definitely had this conversation where there's a work version of ourselves and a social version of ourselves, and those are generally quite different people, because we just know, I think I have spoken about this on the podcast, you just know how to present yourself in a different way. And I'm conscious that I try and bring the better versions of those two personalities, if you like, to both sides. okay, there may be some points where you miss as anyone would, but I had some feedback recently that really made me think, kind of, who do I believe in terms of that perception of myself? I mean, specifically, the conversation was around my own self-awareness. And you guys have often told me that you think I'm really self-aware for my age, and I'm really good with it. That's something that I take forward and I'm quite proud of. The feedback that I had from a project piece that I'd done was that the people didn't think I was self-aware at all. I think the comment was, you're actually one of the least self-aware people I think I've ever met, which is actually quite a deep comment. And I can take those things at face value, and I can kind of go, okay, fair enough. If that's your perception, that's fine. And then it resonated with me a little bit, because the person that gave that is somebody that I generally look up to. And I was like, well, who do I believe? Do I believe these two idiot friends of mine that I talk to once a week socially about what they think of me? Obviously, I don't think you're idiots. I'm only joking. Or do I believe this person that I respect and work with, or have worked with in this scenario? And I'm not quite sure where I stand with it. And again, other people's perceptions don't have to take an effect on me, but you are worth what people essentially tell you you're worth. There's also that piece to it as well. So I'm left feeling a bit conflicted. I think what, Lee, you said, just because I've gone on a massive tangent, if you like, I think what you said around the work piece and how it may be good for one person and your advice to people can only gauge what you've learned is completely valid and completely fine. And I think if this was a work piece, that sense check and that advice is hugely appreciated from anybody that's kind of thinks you're worth your mettle, you know. But I don't know, it's left me a little bit confused.
So I recently at work, something I think is a really good thing as well. So we've recently done a series of 360 feedback, which for people who don't know, listening or watching, is where you get feedback from a spectrum of people. So people you work alongside, people who might report into you, generally your boss, other people at that level. You know, try and get 5, 6, 7, however many people to give a view on you and what they think, and that, you know, then that it's a good way then for you to identify behavior things. And then I was talking today about my own feedback as well as feedback that I'm going to be giving out to people and what we do with them, and it's really for, you know, for personal development plan stuff. And what you get on there, so there's 2 points to this. One is it's quite a broad spectrum, so you're kind of rated from, like, you never do this, you rarely do it, you sometimes do it, you do it most of the time, and you always do it. And within the same category, I've got people who say that I always do something and I rarely do something on the same question. And again, it's back to the people's lens thing. So number one is you will always get a spectrum of feedback. And a lot of that is, and the reason I think it's relevant for what you're saying is it's personality, behavior. A lot of it is behavior. Does this person do this? Do they not do that? And I say there is a broad spectrum of it. Some of it will be reflective of what people see. Some will be people's own view on things. It will be the lens that people see through. And I think also people see different things at different times. So whilst whatever, you know, behavior A, are they using your thing like self-aware? We talk to you in a very specific context here, and we've seen a lot of learning over the years, and there's things we talk about and you can see it, but that doesn't mean in everything you ever do that might come across or be, you know, I don't think behaviors are finite. And so same for myself, the way I act, if someone came to me with something, as much as, let's say, it's not the case, sometimes my response to them will be reflective of what I've got going on. So I might have more patience or less patience for something, or more understanding or less understanding. And I do it, I'll reflect. And sometimes I think, oh God, I think actually my response probably wasn't what I wanted it to be. And it was because I was pressured or whatever else. So I think there's a lot of things that go in, but someone who I gave that less than desirable response to won't see the other 99 out of 100 things. They'll just see that one, and then that's their field of vision on it. So I suppose it's back to the bit I said at the start, is I don't think things are always black and white. So I don't think there's one true answer for who you are, who anyone is. And I saw that in my feedback. And the other thing on the 360 that's important, and this is part of me when I'm going to be talking to people and me taking on my own, is some of it may just be down to perceptions. Some of it may be completely, and actually people's perception is as important as the factual thing, if that makes sense, which takes you back to a bit I was saying on how I do or don't respond on things. So I do think there's a spectrum to behaviors and personalities, and actually it's quite, this is why I think 360 feedback strong, is you can get different perspective from different views, and then you kind of aggregate that all together. And it's whether, you know, things are a reflection as a whole, or it's how certain scenarios are interacted or certain people. And I think there can be, you know, in terms of you're saying, how do you take conflicting things? You've got to make your own assessment on it, or anyone listening who's in the same position. I know I do myself, decide what is and isn't. And I think it's just a reflective piece, is actually, you know, if you think, and I've done this with my feedback, if I don't think that's me, where have I given situations to give rise to that might be the case, and how can I learn that? And I was, ironically, back to the stuff I was saying at the start about the concept in my head around judgment, I thought the same in the 360, because there'll be things from that that'll implant themselves in my brain, and I'll be more conscious of them in my interactions with people than I would have been before. And it's only because it's kind of, and it might not be all the time. It might just lift where I had, you know, 3 people give you a 4, 3 people give you a 3, and 2 a 2. It might just move them all up a level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think also with your 360, and Joe, I do want to get your point on this. So there's a bit I want to touch on. I think with your 360 is that you could have ticked somebody off right before they completed it, and their opinion of you is fully justified on the last interaction they had with you.
Yeah. And in fact, that person I might have only had 5 interactions with, and they got me, all 5 of them were on a bad day or whatever else. And it's
those things.
All 5 of them might have been when they were having a bad day as well, and it's jaded it. And this is why it's all subjective. I think very subjective.
I think and something I've learned in the last few weeks is that I thought, and I've always classed myself as a charismatic motivator. We've had these conversations on the podcast, but I have like analytical strands. I have analytical like tendencies, and definitely one of those is like a list. I sometimes, or I had done a list of things that I need to do to be able to take the next step, whether that be at work, whether that be at life, or whatever. And it's one of those that I thought, in this specific example, my self-awareness was ticked and boxed off. And not that I never had to worry about it again, but it was something that I had to give less attention to, because other areas of things that I want to work on myself maybe need a bit more attention. And I was like, okay, well, I could, that's boxed off. I can put that away, and that's gone in the completed drawer of my imaginary filing cabinet. That's in the done bit. But now I'm like, well, do I bring that back out? And I think something that I've learned over the last few weeks, quite quickly actually, is that the things that you need to learn aren't one-liners. They aren't a simple, be more self-aware, done, tick that off. It's how to be more self-aware in a conflicting environment when there's various challenges from left, right, center, backwards, forwards, in all types of manners, while things outside of your control are going to affect your opinion of it. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa. And that's the bit that I knew, but maybe I was a bit naive as to the application. And that hasn't changed or deferred me or unmotivated me to better myself or to move or improve my position. It's just, sometimes these things aren't taught to you, and sometimes rightly so, right? Sometimes rightly so. You need to learn these things and walk into those doors and, you know, bang your nose and go, ow, that hurt. How do I improve that? And I think maybe with this, I have banged my nose on the door, and I've got to find the key to unlock it, for want of a.
Oh, you made a lot out of that analogy there. I like it.
Look, I do my best.
I like the banging nose on the door, by the way, thing, because it's sometimes, and this isn't like your thing, but it's, and I see, you know, I'd use this analogy if I'm talking to my kids, and I might steal that one for them. Is sometimes you could have a big blinking arrow that says, if you push this door, you will walk into it. You need to pull it. They'll still walk into it because we know, and it's only once the consequence is there that you have a point of reference to then move on. It's the same. It's not your self-awareness, and like what you said, it's ticked off, it's in a drawer. Because for me, it's almost like once you're aware of that skill, it's always there. You're always carrying it with you, because you've always got to be self-aware. And almost our computer game, it's almost like, I'm a level 1 now at that, and then and actually, as your other skills grow, that has to grow as well. So you're
Yeah.
constantly checking yourself, and
Yeah.
you know, till you get to level whatever.
I suppose
level
you
100.
don't touch a kettle twice, do you? So that's
But
another
you do
one.
once.
That's another one. Yeah, but you learn more if you touch it once than if you don't touch it at all.
Absolutely.
I'm full of analogies today.
I like it. I like them all.
Joe, appreciate I've not really come to you on this. Where do you sit?
Yeah, I really like the conversation. Don't touch the kettle twice. Really like that. It sort of goes back to that thing, you can't tell people what to do, right? Because they don't want to be told what to do. Right? So it's like bang your nose on the door. So going back to your first thing is, I read a book by Ray Dalio, and thank you for TikTok joining. Really appreciate you. Thank you. Is it James Kane 222 joined? So a lot of joining, which is great. Thank you, and a bit of follow as well. Kind of user and lots of numbers just followed. I can't even get the numbers. Thank you for that. Bit of feedback on there as well, by the way, right? I'm not going to say that out though.
I agree wholeheartedly, though, Joe. Head over to TikTok if you want to see.
I'll go with you, Leonardo DiCaprio. I love that comment. Thank you. So Ray Dalio said, whoever gives you feedback, first you've got to look at the weighted feedback. What authority do they hold to give that to you? You know, where is their skill set? Do they have that authority to say you're the least self-aware person ever that I've ever met? That was what I think you said, right? Firstly, how self-aware are they? Do they have that? Where's the weight? If in your mind they are very, very, very self-aware, in your opinion, and they demonstrated it, not just once, but on 3 or 4 occasions, then you can probably say, yeah, they're probably a very self-aware person. So that's a question you've got to ask yourself. I think Ray Dalio's like, because people give a lot of opinion and a lot of feedback, but where is it coming from?
I think somebody that's that self-aware probably wouldn't use the terminology that person used.
Right. So you can start to sort of unpack that a little bit. So that's the first thing. The second thing is intention. What was their intention? You know, what Lee was saying. What happened just before that? What's happened during to give you that? So, you know, if the intention is to help you, would you give it in that way? Right. So if there's that, what's the other thing I want to say? The lesson for these sorts of feedbacks and things turns up like the banging the nose on the door, turns up in different disguises. So if you do have to learn a lesson, say it is that self-awareness thing, you know, we all, like you said, it's not taught in schools. It should be taught in schools, by the way. I think I'm very strong about that, that actually I wasn't self-aware until something massive happened in my life, on my suppression. And okay, so I've still got a lot to go. I'm self-aware to a degree, but I still think there's tons and tons to go. Like you said, Ron, right? We think we're self-aware, but actually we all get hit with things that make us think, oh, maybe I'm not as self-aware. Perhaps this is one of them. Perhaps it is, maybe. But it depends where it comes from. So that's my other thought on it. And the last thing really is, for me, is how you did a project, you delivered it. I suppose a question for me is, in what context was this delivered, and how did you process it when it was delivered to you?
I got a lot of feedback at once in this conversation, so it wasn't something that I immediately jumped at. If we look past, for the sake of the conversation, let's look past the words that we used, right? Let's look past you're the least self-aware person I've ever met, and let's just say that line was something along the lines of, you're not as self-aware as you think you are, or I don't think you're that self-aware, right? Let's put it in a more neutral term. I think that for argument's sake.
Yep.
Sorry, what was the first question? What was the first part of that? What context was it given in? It was given in a conversation following some work that I'd done in relation to my understanding of how to do a certain couple of tasks. I don't want to get too far into it in this forum, but I'd done some work that was going to get feedback come back from it. I knew that from the outset. So it was a learning piece, if you like. And in doing so, I anticipated some feedback. And as I say, I half expected a list of things that I could box off in 6 months and put in the shelf, or go back to the teacher and say, look, I've done my homework, it's all done. And then get a green tick or whatever. And as I say, I've learned in the last couple of weeks or so that comes around in a much different manner. It was given as part of a conversation to put in a plan in place to better myself and look better moving forward. So there were good intentions. I believe there were good intentions, and they told me there were good intentions, and I've got no reason to believe that the intention wouldn't have been positive, because a lot of the other feedback that I got was actually really quite positive. So that's probably why it's quite stand out, right? Because I've got quite a decent bit of positive feedback, and nobody, when you get feedback like this, nobody really focuses on the positives, do they? Like, I mean, you can lie to me and tell me that you do, but you don't. You think about all the terrible things they said about you, or, you know, not the terrible things, but the progressive things.
That's a learning curve right there. To recognize.
Yeah, no, true. But I don't think anyone in their real mind, at a first glance and first reflection, will look at the positives. They'll say, what do they think I need to work on? And that's where I am. Maybe in a month's time, I'll look back and go, you know what they said about X, Y, Z is actually valid. And I am good at that. So yeah, that was the context that it was given in. And sorry, the second part of your question, I know I briefly answered it.
So I'm just thinking about what you just said. And my next question is really about, what did you say when they said that? Or what no, let's say, what could you have said when they said that?
A lot of things that I can't repeat on a podcast.
Okay, well, give us.
No. I think. I mean, you'll find. I think when the conversation comes in that manner, it triggers for me like a fight or flight response, in a way. What I did do was say, okay, fair enough. If that's what you think, that's fine. I didn't say I disagree with you. I think that I am. But I did say that before they made that comment. That's what led them to that comment. I said, oh, well, I think I'm quite a self-aware person. Actually, I don't, was how that conversation went. So I didn't really challenge. I said, I think I probably apologized and said something along the lines of, I'm sorry that I've come across in a way that isn't reflective of who I am, because that's not fair. It was never my intention to come across as somebody that was a challenge or difficult or anything other than what I was intending to be, which was understandable, knowledgeable, and wanting to learn. Which is, you know, I don't wake up in the morning to come to work and be a phallic object. I come to work to do a good job, to learn, and to do the best thing I can. I'm doing my best to not swear.
I'll have to tick that sweary box otherwise when I upload it.
The 18+ one.
But the thing is, I wanted to get to, Ryan, and it's really important, and it's really difficult. It's a bit back in the podcast when I talked about, okay, tell me where I suck, or tell me where I am very poor, right? Mm-hmm. Opening up that box. And I suppose the antidote to this is when you get that, and I'm going to tell you this because I was going to coach this through, but I'm going to tell you, is when someone says things like that, you need to say, talk to me about that. Tell me more. So then you can get their thought process behind the reasons that they just said that comment. Because one, you're either going to get, I just said it because what you just said to me triggered me, because it might have been. Or two, it's going to be, okay, I didn't put that in the right context. This is what I mean. Did you?
The conversation wasn't geared up for that kind of conversation. I anticipated the conversation would be lighter, probably more positive based. Probably you missed on ABC, you nailed XYZ quite well. I think you need to do EFG a bit more to get the ABC to look a bit better. That was how I anticipated the conversation to be, and it was maybe a little bit more hostile than that. Not because they were aggressive or I were aggressive, but I think what I wanted out of the conversation wasn't what they had intended to give me out of the conversation. and it didn't escalate, or it didn't give, we didn't come up with it slagging each other off or whatever, but it was just went in a different avenue than I anticipated. If it were a conversation where the planned feedback was to point out things that I was poor at, then yeah, I would dive into that conversation, or I would at least expect them to justify that comment and give me something with that. But yes, I think it, on another day, I probably could have sat there and said, where's that come from? But it was just, I think in a way it took me aback a little bit. I didn't anticipate to get that. And I think the subject that it was on, because it's always something that I've held myself in a higher regard for, and having that was a bit disconcerting, a little bit off-putting maybe.
Was this a recent conversation? Is it quite recent?
Yeah, it was this week. What day are we? Thursday. Yeah, it was this week sometime.
So it's clearly struck a nerve. So a couple of things is, what could you do now? Because it's clearly something that you're holding on to. So what could you do now to address that in a way to go back and say, you told me this and I've been thinking about it. Talk to me more about the reason about that. And so my next question is, considering that, and then asking, because it's you're holding on to it, what could you do differently now to help you?
That goes back to the first part. It's not a conversation that I think would be not able to go back on, because I mean you could, but I mean that's not what it's there for.
What's stopping you having that? Because it's clearly done something.
Things I can't really disclose on the podcast, but that's fine.
Right.
So that in essence isn't really an option. However, what was the second part? You throw me off my course.
What could you do differently now?
What could I do differently now? It goes back to what we were talking about last week, of me always wanting to prove the world wrong.
Okay.
And that really triggers that in me. Thinking now, what can I do? That really triggers that in me to be like, just go out there and we'll just go out and just prove this person completely wrong. And there are some scenarios last week that I completely agreed with Lee with, and I was like, yeah, maybe I could stand off of that. This is one that I don't think that I will or could. I think it's in my personality that not that I will fight that, prove that person wrong, but I will go out and not give anybody the excuse to say that about me again.
What do you think needs to happen then? What is your initial plan? What would be your initial action to address that? What's coming to mind?
I think I need to take stock of what was said a bit more, because as I say, it was only earlier this week. So I need to take a stock of a bit more of what conversation entailed and what was around it, and kind of how it sat. Then see if it's worth its weight in toffee, me entertaining it, based off what you said earlier. And then just being self-aware of my self-awareness, for want of a better phrase, just being aware that I need to be more aware. I think if I take it back out of that completed drawer and put it back into my to-do drawer, then that might do it. But again, in a way, and I know we are running out of time, that has its own negative connotation on me, because that's a regression. It's a progression long term. It's a regression short term, and that's something that I would struggle with, because I feel like I'm not at a place where I feel like I am regressing. I don't feel like I'm a worse person than I was 3 months ago. I don't feel like I'm worse at my job than I was 3 months ago. But in doing this, does it mean that in 12 months' time I'll be better than where I am now? I don't know.
Sound like a little bit of belief there about, I feel like I'm regressing when I have to put this drawing in the to-do. So it's around thinking about what you're thinking about yourself in the moment. You are a different version after that conversation. You're a different version right now after this conversation. You're making a judgment call on, am I better, am I worse? Is it about, what value am I getting from this? How can I grow from this? This is what you're doing right now. You're growing because I'm putting it back in my to-do drawer, which is a great thing. And thinking and reflecting, going, okay, what do I need to do now? Maybe to prove this person wrong, to have that conversation perhaps, to reflect. And is it a question I do need to have, and ask them, tell me where that, talk to me about when you said this. These are all things that will address that issue and will make you grow and become more self-aware, right? Because you would have had that difficult conversation. And it's about having that difficult conversation that will make you grow. But it depends on what's best for Ryan. So take an action, like the reflection sound like an action, reflect on that, and then think about the next step, about how you can, deal with that and make it something that's going to help you become better.
Yeah. I'm conscious of time. We've got 2 minutes and 17
seconds. Out of the corner of my BDI, we'll do takeaways of the wrap up and stuff. The only thing and we touched on it earlier, the only thing I'd say, support of it on Ryan, is I think where you said the regression bit is I don't think that would be the case. I think self-awareness is always, I don't think that ever goes in the drawer. I think that's always there. You can't say I'm it and that's it and I don't need to look on it again, because we're all different versions of ourselves at different times during the day for different reasons. And I think that reflectiveness, I think, is once it becomes a concept, it's always there. It's always out there. I don't think you ever master it. And we all slip, including myself, we all slip back with that sometimes.
Me too. Yeah, absolutely. We all get hit on the nose by that door, like you said, and touch the kettle. And you might touch it, but the lesson's going to turn up in a different way. This self-awareness lesson has turned up in a different way from someone else, and it just threw you a little bit. We all get it. It all happens to all of us. And yeah,
just don't walk into the door whilst you're holding the kettle, because it's the burnt arms, everything. It'll be awful. But I think that the self-awareness never goes away would be my takeaway from today. Jose, quick, we are 1 minute and 7 seconds.
Takeaway from today, if you're going to get, like Ryan said, if you're going to get that opinion, where's that opinion? How weighted is it? Where is that authority coming from? If it's self-awareness, how self-aware is the person who's giving the advice on self-awareness? That's my takeaway.
Mine is that you don't touch the kettle twice.
Nice.
I like that. Everyone out there, we thank you very much. Check us out social media at listen TOIN. Check out Joe on social media, Jose Noya, InspirationNation, stick it everywhere, and of course inspirationnation.org.uk for all your merchandise. And I'm going to rush my mug into the screen quickly and breathe. Cool. Right. Anything else, guys, before I sign us off?
Yeah, you've got less than 10 seconds, I think. So
3, 2, 1, Inspiration Nation. Catch you guys later.
So I want to know now, what's your biggest takeaway? Don't forget to hashtag it with Inspiration Nation in the comments below, and make sure you commit to action. Thank you for checking it out. So don't forget to catch all our other Inspiration Nation podcast episodes right over here. So go check them out. Also, don't forget to subscribe, because that will tell you when your next video goes live by you hitting that amazing bell. So until next time, it's Inspiration Nation, and I'll see you right over there.